So we got Justin Stone, director of hitting with the Chicago Cubs, also owner of Elite Baseball Training and Elite.tv. Justin, make sure maybe you put a link to that too in the chat at some point before the end of the day, just so people have that resource, that online resource too.
Sure.
But yeah, so today's topic is going to be rate of force. So basically how fast that we are, generating power, and I'll let him kind of talk about it. He's got a lot of really cool gadgets and a really cool facility in terms of that. Working on putting sensors on the muscles to actual, bone structures and things like that. So Justin, I'll kind of turn it over to you and kind of let you do your thing.
Yeah, in terms of rate of force development, the downside of the things we're going to talk about is there's only a few people in the world that can really measure it. Ryan, myself being a couple of them, because unless you want to dish out $55,000 for a force plate, you're just forced to eyeball it. But with that being said, there are some characteristics of how the body interacts with the ground that I'll go over, and drills, regardless of whether you can measure this on your own or not. So 2.5 years ago, I started using the first baseball force plates that were the size of a batter's box to capture the independent leg forces that were going into the ground. Because we've always heard as coaches that you need to get into your legs. And we all agree upon that, but that means a different thing to every person. And getting into your legs is a pretty vague, generic concept. So in terms of being able to hold a back leg loading mechanism into my forward advance, and then my front leg interaction with the ground, we had to figure out, and I had a kind of a blank canvas to do so, of what is relevant, what does getting into your legs mean, and what should we be teaching that we find is important that crosses just the general population of hitters that we were testing. So we found out that basically whatever your back leg loading force is, I take that with me into my forward advance. I'm trying to stay anchored into the ground with my back leg. Eventually, the body is going to start turning, and the front leg is going to accept more weight as it stabilizes that firm front side. But when the heel plant comes down, and the interaction with that heel into the ground is extremely crucial. And we've all, as players and coaches, have talked about heel plant at some time in your life. But I feel like it's one of those areas that just goes relatively overlooked. And I'll give you an example here. Think of yourself hitting off of a tee. And when you hit off of a tee, and I see this in my facility all the time because I'm doing lessons all the time, players falling over the tee or across the tee into the other batter's box on virtually every swing. And they kind of use that momentum and they go down and they pick up another ball and they put it on the tee. And I say, that's not okay. That's your body trying to send you a message. And that's what the one thing that we have to realize about drill work. Drill work can have a negative connotation at times if you the more you read things on Twitter, because everybody's feel is going to be something different. And the design for any particular drill is creating your feel. And I always say that your body is always sending you messages, but it's up to you as the player to use those messages, listen to them, and use them for feedback. Otherwise, it's the tree in the woods that has fallen, doesn't make a sound, and that answer it's making sound waves, but if there's nothing there to receive it, then it's mute. And that's the same thing here. If you're not receiving the feedback your body's trying to give you, then that too goes mute. It's unusable. And those players are often diagnosed as low feel, which means they're just not paying attention to their body. So that heel plant, getting back to the long story long, getting into the ground is really important. How it interacts with the ground and the amount of force, pressure, and speed of that interaction is what we're getting into now with your rate of force development. So I said our back leg loading force gets taken into your front leg. The front leg accepts that energy and weight, and then it's going to add on to it. So basically, front leg force ends up doubling whatever your back leg load was into ground. And this is measured in vertical force. Not that you need to know that, but that's what I'm talking about. So after thousands of athletes, we saw a number of hitters. And I started with the overall hip speed, which leads to better speed, leads to greater exit velocity if we're squaring. After that was important. I was going down the the path in a shopping cart versus a Ferrari. And me, that overall force is important, but it's not near as important as the speed in which you're creating that. So we call that your rate of development. So what I mean is, we'll have a player that creates 200% weight into their front. That's a really high number. Body weight into their front leg, creating greater turn speed. That's a high number. But if it takes them longer to do so, we're measuring this in milliseconds. If it's taking them, say, 25 seconds to create that force, I would rather have the player with 160% body weight that can create that rate of 7. And we all know that this is due to the time constraint of the move pitch. So we started to rephrase the way we were in the front leg interaction with the ground. That heel plants, it has to be a violent punch to the ground with front heel. A violent punch to the ground. Most players, that's going to give them front leg extension. Some players, though, will have a softer or bent front knee, but it still has to stabilize. It can't give. So I'll stand up and demonstrate what that means. You can see my knees. So it's not uncommon for a hitter, and I'm trying to think of names here. Dustin Pedroia, although I think his knee injury is partly due to what I'm getting ready to talk about. Mark McGuire was one, too, that when they swung, their front knee never completely locked out. It was always bent still. However, it stabilized. It wasn't giving this way. So what you'll find with players is they use that front leg as well to absorb time on an off-speed pitch. So when I'm doing this in the rate development, I'm not being off time, because that is a really big ingredient. Being a good hitter, you have to be good hitting off time. So the same creates a very rate of force development for max back, and more important, correlating this to time to contact. Because again, we're going back to time constraint with a fast moving ball. The leg is also what's absorbing energy to allow you to hit off time. So when I have that player with a soft front knee, and you see it giving this way, they might be that on the off speed to buy time, and then they get their heel interaction with the ground. But if I have a player that's on a fastball, and we're testing here once again, and they're sliding forward and that front knee is giving and they're hitting a fastball, that's not a good thing. That's dissipation of energy. That means that this rate of force development is elongating on a long period of time. So if you were just eyeballing this, generally, and I say generally because the longer I've done this, the less absolutes I believe there are about hitting, and there may not be any. But generally, you're going to see the front leg get extension prior to ball contact. So if you were eyeballing it, just as a generality, front leg, front knee extension before the bat hits the ball. After that, the rate of force development's probably a little slow, but again, there's always those outliers, and I think the players that stabilize on a bent front knee and it never gives, they could still be producing a really good rate of force development. Before I get into the work about that, that's kind of just a general explanation of what it is. If there's any questions, Ryan, or if you want to MC that, before I go into some of the things I do for it and the way you can train it.
Yeah, if you guys have any questions on it, feel free to just kind of unmute yourself. Just as a little bit faster than going in the chat. We'll try to be efficient with that. I think it's really interesting. Okay, so hold on. We do have a question here. So do you feel like hitting with a – Jordan, you want to just go ahead and unmute yourself?
Yeah, my bad. I was trying to do it fast. So would you say that hitting with a bent knee is actually producing more force, or we want that elongated before contact? Like, I guess I'm confused on which one we think is better.
Again, going back to generally, because the hitter that I've tested that is the absolute best numbers on a force plate that I've ever seen actually hits with a bent front knee. So, and I wouldn't have guessed that looking at it. However, in the majority, I'm talking 90% or more, are going to be locked out prior to ball contact of those guys that have really good numbers. But you always have that one outlier. Hey,
Justin, Matt Lyle here. Hey, how you doing, buddy?
Good.
Hey, and I apologize for jumping on a minute late, but and this may be a question for later or relative to this, and I might have missed it, but I remember you talking one time about when you talked about landing in that front foot. I know that I heard you talk about one time landing more of a soft landing, and then as you made your decision to go into heel plant, you were pushing force down a lot more in that. Can you expand on that? Is that for a different time in regards to like soft landing and getting into that force into that heel as you land?
Yeah, so the way in which you land, again, I would prefer hitters to be soft because that means I'm controlling myself in my back leg. So this kind of goes into another topic of dynamic balance. So many of our amateur hitters lack dynamic balance. They lack body control. And dynamic balance means my ability to control myself on one leg for an extended period of time. So the tendency of hitters is they push away from their back shoe instead of gaining ground while still keep that forward shoe. And that gets harder the more a person moves forward. So the further my center of mass travels forward, the harder it is to keep grounded in that back side as I spread my legs out. So that needs to be done, though, for good adjustability. That also means I would be landing soft. Hitters that push away from their back shoe to advance their center of mass tend to collapse or catch their body weight in their front side, so they're going to land heavy. So my term of landing soft is basically more controlling my center of mass while maintaining good dynamic balance. Everybody's foot interaction with the ground is slightly different. I prefer hitters who have a flatter stride foot as they're getting into their foot plant because it keeps good angles from the knee inside the front shoe. You will have players, and there's been some really good players. I think of Albert Pujols being one that landed really high on the toe. And I used to look at, I know there's two Uptons. I think it was BJ Upton that landed really high up onto the toe and wasn't as good at controlling his front side because his knee would land over or outside of his front shoe oftentimes. It's easier to create good angles in your lower body if we're landing flatter, but doesn't mean it's an absolute again.
So our
heel gets into heel plant, and that is the time of hopefully I've recognized the pitch and now I'm ready to commit my turn against it. That interaction with the ground then, once the heel comes down, needs to be as forceful and as fast as possible. So I can be soft on the toe and violent as hell into the heel plant is what I'll be going for there.
So what are you seeing your best hitters do when their front foot lands before they get into full heel strike and attack mode? Are you seeing about 60-40 on the back leg then and at that point?
That's what I teach, and I used to teach 50-50 exclusively. And of course, we're always dealing with more amateur players than we are professional ones because there's just way more of them out there. And if I taught an amateur player 50-50, they would all be forward of it. You're going to find your hitters hit from somewhere around 50-50, and you'll see a variance of like 52 to 52, but all of them are right around 50. But when I taught 60-40, players did a much better job of landing softer and basically hitting from center without going forward of center. So for about 10 years, I taught exclusively 50-50, and I didn't feel like anybody did it very well. And I started teaching 60-40, and guys got to 50-50, and girls much better.
And the last question, I apologize for taking all the time. When you shifted your teaching from 50-50 to 60-40 in the back, are you just having them stay into that back heel longer? Is that the cue that you're helping versus?
Yeah.
I know that if I was just to cue 60-40, I would have a bunch of people that just reached.
For sure. I don't think I say 60-40 very often with hitters, but I do talk about the back heel a lot. And for players that lack dynamic balance, I do a lot of drills with literally trying to keep their back heel down throughout rotation. They won't do it, but it's going to give them a different feel of staying stacked in their back leg longer. So pick out your favorite drill, tell them to keep their back heel down through rotation and see how it changes their ground interaction.
Good stuff. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for being on, Matt.
Justin, it's pretty cool. Go ahead, Rafi.
Do you ever give your guys a constraint like to anchor their back heel down?
I do.
And what do you use?
I'll put a bat between their feet and have them squeeze it with their insteps. So I can show you that here too. I've done a few of these. I feel like I'm doing a webinar or a podcast every couple days and recycling a lot of the same drills. So forgive me if you've been on with me in the last week because I've demonstrated this one quite a bit. So I'll put the bat between my feet and get another bat and hit. And I'm trying to squeeze the bat. Sorry, I can't see it. I'm trying to squeeze the bat between my insteps, and that will keep my back shoe anchored.
What I was going to say is yesterday, you know, somebody asked Cody Atkinson, the hitting coordinator for the Rangers, you know, what his kind of most important thing was, and if he had to pick kind of one thing. And he basically described what you're describing in a different way. You know, you're talking about, you're using phrases like dynamic balance, you're talking about transferring force. And he basically said from going from one position or a balanced position into another balanced position and being able to, you know, he talks about how it affects your vision, how it affects, you know, your body wants to basically be comfortable. And, you know, when we're moving around too much, we're not in a balanced position, everything's, you know, kind of messed up. So as we're transferring from our backside to our front side, he had some pretty cool stuff on that. And you're basically, you know, giving us the objective information of what you've seen with what's actually happening in the ground.
Sure. And I think that we won't do it here just because of limited time, but a very powerful way to describe or test dynamic balance, and I know you've done it too, Ryan, is the single leg balance drill, where I'll get kids all in my camp. Let's say I got a 16-person class. I'll get them in a line. We'll get on one leg, put the knee up waist high, hold for 15 seconds with their eyes open, and they all kind of laugh and giggle because they can all do it. And then as soon as you force their body to have to use greater proprioception or feel, and you make them close their eyes, they, including just about every pro that you'll ever do, falls down within the first 5 seconds. And the reason is the brain isn't comfortable being on one leg for an extended period of time. And I then asked them the questions, what sports do you see or arts do you see with people on one leg for an extended period of time? To make this go faster, I'll give it to you. Dance, gymnastics, skating, figure skating. I'm not talking speed skating, but figure skating. These guys and girls are on one leg for an extended period of time. With all three of those arts or sports, dance, gymnastics, figure skating, you would say those athletes all have great dynamic balance. And what we do as hitters is, because our brain isn't comfortable in doing that, and just human life, which is why we have to train it, is they all crash and catch themselves into their front leg just subconsciously, because the brain says, hey, I'm not comfortable being on one leg for an extended period of time. Put your front foot down quickly, please, so I feel balanced again. So you have to train that just independently, and that's one of the movement prep drills that I'll do, including with professional athletes that struggle in dynamic balance.
Awesome. Does anybody else have any other questions? And otherwise, we'll go into maybe a couple of drills.
Sure. I'm going to give a couple movement prep drills for this, and then I'll do a couple with the bat that you can do on a tee at home too. Okay, so bear with me for a second.
Perfect. Love it. And that's, you know, that's another person who we've talked about movement prep before. I kind of had a movement prep series in mind. You know, Cody talks about his. We've had strength coaches that have talked about some of this stuff. So, you know, this is something where I think I still see guys sometimes just go into their garage and start hitting. And if you could kind of remember some of this stuff and it's all recorded to do this before you start hitting, it's definitely gonna help you guys out. So, Justin, I'll turn it back over to you.
My movement prep is individualized to the player. It's based on their testing. So I'll see through their movement screen and their tests what their body is just barely depend. And I say, hey, I might have 20 things in your movement prep plan, but I'm only giving you 5 to 10 minutes. You're not going to do the same 20 every day. You're not going to do 20 every day. You might only get 6. But one of the things that I have in my cage while I hit all the time is a kettlebell. And if you think of a single leg deadlift, the pressure, I always say this in terms of how the feet interact with the ground, which is a very long conversation that I don't think we pay enough attention to. But your toes are gripping the ground. But the pressure in both the load and then the heel plant is coming from the heel. So my whole foot is on the ground, but I know in sports they talk about doing everything on the balls of your feet. Hitting is not one of those things. So my toes grip the ground, but the pressure comes from my heel. So the reason why I have the kettlebell is a deadlift, whether with a barbell, which in this case I'll use a bat, a deadlift, or a single leg deadlift, where I'm just going to touch it to the ground and come back up, when my posterior chain is ignited there, it's coming from the back half of my foot. My whole foot is on the ground, but my back heel is what's igniting my posterior chain. Those are the same muscles that we want really firing and anchoring the lower body into swing. So I tell players that struggle with dynamic balance first, your loading mechanism is a single leg deadlift. So for the movement prep, and the importance of this, as Ryan was saying, get the body to feel just correct movement, and it's going to be a lot easier to refine that movement than in the swing. So that's one of them I'll do. I'll say we'll do 3 sets of 5, sometimes less, but single leg deadlift, feel the interaction where that's coming from your foot into the ground. Couple of them that I'll do just from a stationary position here with the PVC pipe. I know on your podcast here or your webinar, you guys have done some of the check swings. What I like to do with the PVC is create a lot more ground force stability. And so you might not be able to see my head, but you'll be able to see my feet, and that's more important here. I put this right on the outside of my shoe, and all I'm doing is putting my hands shoulder level on the PVC. And then I'm just going to go 5 steps through this 10-step progression that I do. But the first part of the progression, all I'm doing is advancing my center of mass and walking away from the pole. I want the pole to be like a flagpole that I've dug 30 feet into the ground. It's providing me stability. I'm holding on to it, yet walking away from it. I really want players to feel pushing into the ground hard. My strings and my quads are all firing, so I'm squeezing here. That's what I call our lower body anchor. The lower body anchor is really easy because the ground is immovable. And I want to have the feeling I'm trying to push the ground away from me. So getting back to what does getting into your legs mean? I feel like most of our athletes will land on bent knees, and I can do that as I am right now. I'm on bent knees. I look at left, yet my legs are completely. So getting into the ground is trying to push the ground away from me. That's a really solid anchor. The next anchor I'm trying to create as I walk away is I'm creating this upper body anchor, and that's from the chest and above. So this is underneath my armpits. That's called your serratus, chest and above and around the back into your scaps. So if I have the anchor above my chest and I have the anchor below my waist, you can see the part that's exposed, and that's the elastic, most elastic region of my body. That's my middle. So by creating those 2 anchors, I'm allowing my elastic middle to be just that. It's going to turn me much more whip-like later on. So I do everything in sets of 5, and the first one is just step squeeze. Second one is going to be a step, squeeze, disassociate. All that is torque. So now with the aid of a stable object, the PVC into the ground, what I'm trying to do is turn my middle without turning my shoulder. So I'm a step squeeze, I'm pausing there, turn my middle. I'm doing that without turning my shoulders. That is the torque of your swing. That is sequencing. In another long conversation, sequencing is energy transfer, and it's the most efficient way to transfer energy from your body out the flow of the body and your arms and back. Not every hitter, in fact, I would venture to say roughly 50% of hitters or less are perfect sequentially in professional baseball. So you can get a lot of imperfect hitters, imperfect bodies, imperfect swings that can really produce. All I'm saying is I want to practice in terms of youth athletes trying to get better. I want to give them the best tools to be as efficient as possible. And that's a really easy one. You'll find a lot of hitters that can't disassociate. That means they're going to try this drill, and their upper body anchor flies off with them. Their front shoulder pulls off. So stability with this pull in my shoe makes it easier to hold that anchor up top. That's step 2. Step 3 is I'm going to do the same thing, but it's one fluid motion. So this is a little more game-like. Step turn, reset. Step turn, reset. How much torque I create is going to be limited by how mobile or immobile I am in my thoracic and my middle. So for me, I'm a really stiff athlete, so I get very little hip and shoulder separation. You're going to find if you have youth athletes, especially if they're under 19 years of age, they're likely going to be way more mobile up top and be able to create a lot more hip and shoulder separation. One isn't necessarily better than the other. It's just you kind of eyeballing it as a coach and understanding that stiffer movers are going to look different when they do these drills than very loose ones. In fact, for the young players, the looser ones are generally harder to coach because they don't have enough strength yet to stabilize their amount of mobility, which is why younger players tend to have a way more length in their swing. Right? It's a whole other subject. Step 4. In terms of the PVC pipe that I use, this is not a good one. This is one I actually use for weight training, but 4 foot for youth, 5 foot height for older or mature adults. But the diameter of it's what's really important. I'm looking for 3/4 of an inch for adults and 1/2 inch for children. But that's important for this next drill I'm going to do. This next drill combines the hip turn with the slotting action. And all these things are connected. My lat connects down on my hip bone in several different places, but down on my hip bone, but also to the bottom of my scapula. So if I'm committing my lower body to the swing, it's automatic that the rear elbow is going to be pulled down into the slot. The slotting action should happen as a byproduct of rotation. We're going to practice that by the bend the pole drill. So this time I'm going to step, turn, but I'm trying to bow the pole this way towards the camera. So I'm pulling down on it in this action, and the rear elbow is sliding next to my midsection. So those are the first 4 drills that I'll do in this. I really like that bend the pole drill. And then I do the exact same progression, taking the stability out of the ground. So once I lift this out of the ground, I repeat the whole process, but it becomes way harder because I don't have the added stability outside my shoe anchoring me to the ground. So the hard part becomes my upper body anchor then. So if I don't have stability aiding me, you're going to see young players that can't disassociate, that are turning what I call a one-piece turn, which is the hip and shoulder going together at the same time, which we would really classify as early torso rotation. But that's the majority of amateur athletes have that. And the reason is they don't know how to create the upper body anchor, or they're physically just not strong enough to do it yet. So even the pole drills will aid them in scapular region strength. That bend the pole drill will really light up the back of their shoulder. They're going to feel that in a muscle called the infraspinatus. It'll really light up and like, oh man, I'll be sore there the next day. That lets them know that they're doing it correctly. So those are the brief 5 movement prep drills that I do. And I'm going to give you a couple of my favorite for rate of force development and the front heel interaction with the ground. And this is one that I did a lot with Mike Talkman for the Yankees. It's a guy that I've hit with over the 3-year period or so. And through testing, had a little bit slower of a rate of force development. One of our goals was to reduce his overall time to impact. And, you know, as you climb the ladder, that gets way more important is that time to impact number. And this is usually one of the lowest hanging fruit is we can improve the person's rate of force development and their time to impact can go down. So I'm going to put myself in a post-stride position. And I want to have my front foot at whatever angle I normally get it to when I heel plant. So it'll be post-stride. I'm already wide. My hands are already back. And I'll put my front foot completely on the ground at whatever angle I feel like it's normally at. Now I'm going to do this without a bat to start just to demonstrate. But you can do it hitting a ball off the tee. But I feel like you have to just get the movement of this down before you can do it with a bat in your hand. So I'm at 50-50 or close to it right now. I'm going to lean into my front leg until I feel like I'm 80-20 in it. So I'm overloading my front leg. What I'm going to do when I'm ready is I'm trying to turn my lower body just with my front hip. So generally, both of your hips are working against each other. So the muscles on the insides of your legs are called your adductors, and they're squeezing your pelvis as tight as it can. You're squeezing your butt cheeks together. That's why if you've ever paid attention to this when you swing, you can't clench your butt cheeks any harder together than when you swing a baseball bat. So your adductors are squeezing your pelvis into rotation. And so both of your hips are literally working together to create turn speed. What I want to do is I want to take this back hip out of it by overloading my front leg and forcing just my front leg to have to do the work. And by doing so, you have to get to a more violent heel plant to feel fast turn speed. So this is what it'll look like. So I'm wide at post stride. I'm at 50-50. I'm going to start to lean into my front leg, 80-20, punch the ground with my front hip. punch the ground, with my front foot. Lean, get into 80-20. And now when you see me do that, you notice that my front shoe actually goes backwards. So I'm punching the ground so hard that my feet probably came off the ground completely, and my back foot actually lost ground. It loses ground because my front hip is retracting. So I'm using my front leg to retract my hip, and it did it so fast that it pulled my shoe with it going backwards. You'll see that with golfers that have great vertical force, and that's essentially what I'm doing right now. I'm creating great vertical force into the ground. I'm exaggerated, and because of that, my feet came off the ground, like a long drive golfer will often do, that creates great vertical force. In fact, I have one hitter, his name's Nick Solak for the Rangers, and when we were doing his force plate work, we noticed, because there's high-speed cameras on it, he hit both his feet completely off the ground. Now, that's a 165, 175-pound guy that was hitting fourth in the big leagues for the Rangers this year at the end of the year, that creates tremendous buggy whip bat speed because of his ground force into the ground. So his body off the ground when he hits. So that's literally my favorite one. You got to get coordinated enough to do it, to feel it into your front leg and try to retract the front hip just by using and isolating the front hip only. Here's the last two that I like. I'm going to get back into that post-stride position. And this time, I'm going to hit from a 50-50 position. Both of my shoes are completely on the ground. Both my heels are planted. Now, in a real game, it's not likely both your heels are going to be planted at the same time, because the front heel plant should be caused by the backside turning energy into your front leg. But for the focus of this drill, all I'm trying to do here is hit from a 50-50 position and stay anchored. So I want them to feel very stable into the ground, hit from center off of the tee, and maintain their anchors when they're done. I don't want them to feel balanced. So this is making their body pay attention to those messages that their body is sending them. If they're falling over the tee when they're done, so that's not okay. Likely you were hitting off your toes. You'll be surprised how many of your athletes literally do hit off of their front toes and may never even get their heel down at all. So the last piece of that progression is starting ball of the foot on the ground, still post stride, but my heel is barely up. So I might have an inch or less of space of my heel not into the ground. I'm going to start rotation, which will weight my heel and finish the swing. There too, I want to hold the ground and feel balanced when I'm done. By doing so, I will know for myself if I'm getting into a correct heel plant or not. So those are 3 drills I do. You notice I mentioned heel plant a lot, and I didn't say the words rate of force development very much at all, but they're synonymous with each other, because in order to get great rate of force development, I have to get into a really good heel plant. And the faster I can get into the heel interacting with the ground, first touching, and then really providing as much force over as little time as possible, which is something you have to practice. If you don't practice heel plant, or if you don't practice specifically that one drill I showed you of how fast can I get that heel interaction usable for the body, then oftentimes you're going to dissipate some of that energy. And it doesn't mean you can't hit, doesn't mean you can't create really good force. It's just likely that you're not going to be able to do it in a very short time constraint. So for players that lack good time to contact numbers, like on a blast sensor or a Diamond Kinetics sensor, the first thing I'm going to look at is their front legs interaction with the ground. And then I'm going to work my way up the body and just see how tight their turn is, which usually comes from sequencing and length or not length of their swing. Whew, that was a mouthful.
That was awesome. Are you able to kind of maybe talk about some of the EMG testing you guys did in the leg, or is that still?
No, I mean, in terms of the legs, there wasn't anything that wouldn't have surprised you. The glutes and adductors are the work. Upper definitely surprised me, and erectors, those are the big slabs of meat on either side of your spine, are the most active muscles in the upper body during the swing. even more so than the obliques that we know get tremendous stretch. And it happens in the deceleration phase of your swing, which is also interesting. So what are the erectors designed to do is protect the spine. So when you're stopping rotation, essentially your erectors are stabilizing the spine at that point, but that was the deceleration phase of the swing. I haven't done it, obviously. I was hoping on quarantine I'd be able to get back and being the mad scientist for a while, and it just hasn't happened. I haven't done as much EMG work as I'd like to do. It's not quite an easy process to set up. Comes with free 4-letter words.
Yeah. All right. So a question in the chat was, does vertical force, let me pull it up. Does vertical force cause the belt buckle to raise during the hip turn?
Yes. Yeah. So your vertical force will turn eventually hopefully into hip extension. So that is your belt buckle lifting. So good heel plant, we'll get a good firm front leg. Front leg becomes locked out, then the hips get extended, and it's that hip lift that will raise the belt buckle. So they're all tied to each other.
Do you have any drills or advice for players that start their swing with their torso? I find I can practice the slower movements, but when I pick up a bat to full-on swing, I continue to start my swing with my shoulders rather than my pelvis.
How old is this person?
College softball player.
Okay, so for somebody your age, I would say your likely issue is tempo. There's a ton of reasons that people start their upper body too soon. And so you kind of have to dig in and really figure out which one is for you. But for a college softball player, you're likely strong enough to keep an upper body anchor. But for players that start late and or rush, especially in a game, sometimes you can control that in a testing environment or a drill environment, especially off the tee with a non-moving ball. And either anxiety or you're starting too late on the pitcher, both those things are going to speed your body up. If you speed your body up, you're going to jump the sequence. If I speed the body up, I'm going to fire from the upper body first. Your bat knows it has to get to the ball. It's going to do so with as much force as possible in the time that you let it happen. So if I reduce that time constraint and I say, oh, shoot, I don't have enough time to really flow energy through my body, I got to go now, you're going to go with your upper body. So I would look at your tempo first, making sure you're starting on time, and controlling your breathing, controlling your emotions in the batter's box. Both of those things are what usually speed people up, and that ruins sequencing. Without seeing your swing, that's the best advice I can give.
All right, so a follow-up question in regards to the belt buckle is, so if belt buckle doesn't raise, would that be a sign of over-rotation and poor front leg force?
It could be both, and it could be, going back to our movement screen, the inability to control the pelvis. So this is anterior and posterior tilt. That's just my ability to go from here to here, isolating that move just with my body. If players fail that, and you'll be surprised at how many do, they're likely never going to get to that belt buckle that raises. It doesn't mean they can't hit. Over-rotation would definitely cause that. I spent more time talking about deceleration and breaks this year than I ever have. I don't know that I ever did it before. We probably did it subconsciously, but the hitters that don't do it well, you have to train it into them. And we don't train that very much in baseball. So that's where Ryan's check swing drills kind of go in. They're great for not just getting a person connected, but improving your deceleration rates, which also decrease your time to contact. So over rotation to the pull side is a slow putting on your brakes. It's like taking the car, putting on the brakes gingerly up into the stop sign, where I want the deceleration phase to happen like I'm driving the car 80 miles an hour into a tree. So that's something you have to work
on. With the belt buckle raising, does that mean adjustability in the swing is really based on spine angles?
Well, if you're talking about adjustability to pitch location, then yes. I mean, you can get some people that will lower their center of mass on low pitches, but if you've correctly timed the ball up and you're not making a late adjustment to that, most players will efficiently turn their torso underneath balls, which is why players that land in a more leaned over posture initially, which a lot of us do, we land in an athletic position with some forward lean. That's why the four-seamer at the top of the zone is so hard to hit. It's because we just don't have time to scoop back up and correct ourselves on that posture. So I always talk about, especially if you're dealing with high level velocity, of setting your posture at the top of the zone, because we have time to turn the torso and the spine angle underneath the ball towards the middle or the bottom of the zone.
Awesome. Any drills to keep back leg, in parentheses it says knee, from collapsing when rotating the pelvis? And this is from another college softball player.
The knee from collapsing. Have this person come on and like demonstrate what that looks like.
Okay. Skylar, if you want to give us a little bit more, I don't know if you're able to or not, or maybe just more context from there.
You guys have good questions. This is the most interactive webinar I've done in the last month.
It's one of our more interactive ones too, man. Hot commodity. All right, and then all right, well, we can come back to that one. Definitely want to answer it though. What are your other main movement screens? So I know you've done it in the past where you've done abbreviated versions. Your full version's pretty comprehensive. What are kind of maybe 4 to 6 things that you would pick if you had to limit it?
Yeah, sure. So the one that we do is comprehensive. We've developed it ourselves over the course of the 2 years, and it's stealing from other movement assessments that we find that are really good and adding some of our own that we thought that other movement screens are just limited to. So we combine SFMA, TPI, which is on base U as well, FMS, and then we have like 3 of our own. If I had to narrow it to my top 4, I would do internal and external hip mobility. And I say that's one screen. Internal, external hip mobility. Thoracic rotation is a huge one. That's going to tell me how big the rope is through the center of my body. It's a pretty good one for just general looseness or stiffness. Scapular retraction. Mine isn't very good, so I'm a tight mover. And side bend is a really easy one to do. I'm just standing with my hands to my waist. And I want to see if I can go and stay in plane, so I'm not leaning forward. I want to see if I can go and touch my knee. And I am a little bit short, and that said a lot for me. And I'm probably tighter now. I'm 43, so I'm probably tighter now than I was when I played. But I know looking back, and I've always been fairly stiff, but I know looking back, I disconnected my hands to everything low in the zone, like chopped down at it, at the bottom of the zone instead of turning under it. And I still do it. Like I'm taking front toss or something, and somebody's flipping to me in the low pitch, I'm just beating into the ground. Like I am not capable of enough side bend to turn me under that ball. So in my case, being a stiffer mover for that particular pitch, it does me harm. I would have to find a way to get more mobile and loosen up to be successful hitting balls at the bottom of the zone and not disconnecting. So much of the movement assessment will make sense to your athletes on what they do well and what they do well. There won't be one player, and I haven't had one ever, that has done one of the pieces of the screen well. It's not an indication of their athleticism. It's a way to kind of tie your movement profile to the way you swing the bat. And so, and it gives more knowledge that we can use to help the player. Then I want to get that in my file of things I need to know about you. So obviously, if you're on here today, you're progressive, you want to learn. I have more technology tools to my disposal as Ryan. And that's definitely made me a better coach because I guess less than I did 10 or 15 years ago. I was using less of these things because they just weren't readily available in the commercial market. So I don't get what the pushback. Hitting Twitter has become a dumpster fire of just a lot of negative people that, like a certain way, which is fine. Like, argue your cause till you're blue in the face, but anything that can give me more ammunition for when I have that opportunity. When a player comes to me, and when a player comes to you, man, they're searching for answers. They're not coming just like to hang out with you. They're searching for answers. I want to have every tool in my arsenal to give this player the best answers. And I don't have to tell them where I got it or how smart I am or what my master's degree is. They don't care, man. They just want to know, can you help them? And when you do, and you're confident you're giving them good information, like that's coaching, right? That's where those relationships are built.
That's awesome. So another question here is, does improving vertical force have a direct correlation with better deceleration patterns?
No. It makes deceleration harder, but it makes it also more valuable when you can do it.
Awesome. And then going back to that knee question, it sounds like
Let me rephrase that. Better vertical force is going to be an indicator of better heel plant. So yes, your hips will decelerate better, but the rest of your body is going to turn faster. And so then your upper body is forced to use more deceleration from the stable core. So I should have rephrased that. So like on a K-vest reading, and Ryan, you've seen this, if you have a very elongated red hump, first thing I look at right away is like, how effective is this person's heel plant? Because they're dissipating the turn energy over a long period of time.
Awesome. So going back to the knee question, sometimes might go maybe go back down like Beltray in terms of that. So I think it's collapsing on the backside like through rotation.
Yeah. Okay. And Rizzo will do that for the Cubs sometimes too. He'll go down on his back knee. That's happening post-contact. I wouldn't call it a collapsing of their back knee as much as, especially Beltray, was so wide at foot down. So naturally, when you turn and you're super wide at foot down, your center of mass is going to be lower to the ground. So Beltray would do that post-contact. Part of it was probably a little bit show. But there are hitters that still have the internal cue of, I want to drive my back knee down for better turn speed or better anchoring. But to me, all that it is for them is creating better ground force. So the only thing I ever am like leery of, and that's why I asked her to repeat what she means by the back knee collapsing, because I'll see some players that their back knee will kind of buckle inward like this into the turn. But I still think that is more of a byproduct of not doing a good job of dynamic balance and getting too much into the front leg. So if I'm launching into my front leg and that knee starts to collapse and the shoe does that, and you see them sliding through their turn, and that's why, everybody's cues are different. That would be, to me, what a back knee collapsing is. I don't consider a back knee collapsing like getting into my turn and my back knee making that reverse L.
Awesome. Great explanation. So going back to kind of your movement screen, you kind of left ankle testing off. Would dorsiflex of the ankle be a huge movement screen to help understand production with the rate of force on that side of things?
The ankle mobility is important. It's more important to your dynamic balance than it is your rate of force development of the front leg. So by having enough dorsiflexion, I'm keeping basically a squat pattern into my advance, and players that can't do that can't maintain force into the ground. There's a lot of baseball players that have very poor ankle mobility. I think that was my last Twitter thread. I don't do as many of them as I used to. Like Ryan and I were just talking about this. You'd be surprised how busy we are in quarantine. It's crazy to me, like how much baseball work I'm doing right now, and from my office chair over here. But my last Twitter thread was about that. I was watching Cal Ripken in the 1995 game where he broke the record. I was watching, and I did too. In 1994, had high tops because I think King Griffey Jr. did. I'm thinking like that was bad. That was not very smart for hitters to be wearing high tops, because most of us as baseball players had tight ankles anyway, and that's just making your problem worse. So your ability to stay into the ground was probably reduced because we were wearing shoes that we thought looked cool because King Griffey Jr. wore. So don't wear high tops.
I remember getting my first pair of Griffies back. I think it was called Sports Authority when that was still like around. I don't know if those are still around anymore, but my parents, and it was like a big deal because they were so expensive, and I got got told no, and had to go back, the next weekend, like, come on, I really want these Griffies. And it was like a 3-weekend sales job to try to get those shoes.
Yeah, I would wear somehow. I've got a performance shoe on, running shoe. Obviously, these are like the super flexible shoes because running shoes don't weigh very much. Like for me, put baseball spikes on the bottom of this type of shoe for guys that have tight ankles.
Yeah, definitely. Even I'd be curious to have the Vibram 5s maybe even make a comeback and test on some stuff.
Yeah, that'd be cool. Ideas here.
So a good question here is there something you've learned in the last year, kind of looking at this stuff, that's changed your philosophy from 365 days ago? Is there something, that's altered what you were teaching even just as soon as a year ago, that you've kind of found with some of the research you've been doing?
Man, I've got an answer for that. I won't try to get too long-winded here, but in terms of mechanics, yeah, you heard me say that I've been talking about deceleration more in this past year probably than I ever have before. I don't know that I mentioned it a lot ever previous to that, because I am still not just trying to search for a higher bat speed number, but also a reduced time to contact. And I said the two, well, one's easy. Your rate of force development's way easier to improve than your stability of your core. So the deceleration of your upper body is tougher than your lower body. But both those things will reduce your time to impact. In terms of, and this is probably how I'll leave the conference today, what I've learned in the last just 3 months more than I ever have before is teaching in a cage in a one-on-one setting. I prior to working in professional baseball full-time, I still worked with a ton of professional athletes, but it was always on no clock. Hitting was as much of a conversation as it was drill work. Yeah, I had a lot of pretty cool toys at my disposal, and we use those, but I feel like the difference between my 1 hour lessons with kids and 1 hour lessons with big leaguers is with a big league guy, we might hit for 20 minutes and we might talk for 40 minutes about their swing, about offensive approach, but we talk. There's so much interaction. And then the hour that you have with a 10-year-old, you're driving the entire conversation. You're probing them. You're trying to get them information back. But, oftentimes you're dominating the conversation because they have to be taught how to learn, if that makes sense. But going further than that, of working in pro ball full time, approach is way more important than mechanics. And here's why. I don't have time with professional athletes to spend one-on-one time with as many as I would like to. And I think the knock on facility guys from professional baseball oftentimes was, you're really good in a one-on-one setting, but up here, we're not as concerned about the swing. And that's not the case. Like, everybody's concerned about the swing. But ultimately, when you get out and compete, you have to do so every day, and you're practicing before you play every day. You got to do just that. You got to compete. So the swing you're going to bat with that night, good or bad, is your swing, and you're going to have to figure out how you're going to play with it and how you're going to have success with it. And that goes into your approach is designed to maximize the things you do well, and maybe just what you're doing well that day, and tries to minimize your weaknesses. And going back to like Derek Jeter, like, I wouldn't teach anybody to hit exactly like Derek Jeter. However, the dude had 3,200 hits. It was a monster, like, performance that I would say, and I've never talked to Derek Jeter about hitting, but I would say he would blow us all away on how good he was with his approach and knowing what pitchers were trying to do to combat him in that game within the game. So I've learned in my short time working full-time in pro ball that that's way more important, of learning how to compete with what you have, while at the same time trying to still better my fundamentals or better my swing. Because whether good or bad, you're in the lineup that night. The opposing pitcher doesn't care how efficient your kinematic sequence is on K-motion. He's going to try to blow a 96 mile an hour heater by you, right? So I got to figure out how I'm going to go to bat and combat that in a positive way. So I think that's I've never been thrown in that situation before because I didn't play pro ball either. So I learned so much in my first 3 months working full time, and probably learned more than I gave back, to be honest.
So yeah, that's how I feel too. I feel like, there's nine experience, starting last year, even in a different role this year, just ton to learn. And it's fun because there's a lot of really, really smart guys. And, you talked about Twitter being a dumpster fire, and like when people come together, like that's where like it's way better because, there's different skill sets. And when you kind of merge them, I think that's where really the magic happens. And that's where it really gets fun. The relationships are built. Justin, I want to be respectful of your time. I'm not sure. You mentioned you might have to jump off. So we have two other questions really quick.
Yeah, I'll take two more.
Take them.
I got an 8-year-old girl over here dying to get a workout in against me in a second.
Yeah. What are some ways to improve time to contact? I know you kind of touched on just kind of some front leg drills in the beginning. Talk about maybe some ways to do that with K-Vest.
Yeah, with the upper body, it's rotary stability. So that is, and you can do this without a bat, but the check swing drills are great with the PVC because that's forcing you to accelerate and slow down in a short timing window. But in the gym and things you can do at home, this is not about how strong your core is and doing sit-ups. We call it straight line movements or sagittal plane. And we're trying to get better and more efficient at rotating. So a couple ways you can do this on your own at home. Any type of anti-rotation, especially like dynamic explosive anti-rotation is great. But here's an easier, quicker version. Swing from your opposite side. So we are one pattern movers in baseball. In softball, and swing from your opposite side with a heavier bat and a lighter bat too. So you can do overload, underload trading with that. But because we're one pattern movers, essentially we have one side that tries to accelerate and one side that tries to stabilize. It doesn't work exactly like that. There's crossover on both sides. That's simplifying it big time. So your body is a great protectionist unit and will only accelerate as fast as it knows it can put on the brakes and stabilize. So if your stabilizers aren't very good, we don't train them as hard, the body will naturally slow down the acceleration phase over a longer period of time. That increases your time to impact. So when you reverse that pattern and swing heavier and lighter objects from the opposite side, we're forcing just to rewire the pattern and make them work more efficiently against or with one another. So anytime I do underload, overload training, and I do it all off season, I recommend it. I do it from both sides of the plate.
Awesome. Yeah. And when we did our dry swing series, that was kind of the same type of concept. And what I did for that, Justin, is I had them grab their lightest bat, middle, kind of their game weight bat, and the heaviest bat they could find. And so my kind of quarantine setup was a wiffle ball bat, kind of a game bat or a fungo bat, and then a game bat, because that's all I had. We kind of talked about swinging from both sides on that too. So I think that was the second episode that was recorded. And what I was trying to replicate there were the super speed suggers, which I put a link in the Slack. So if you're looking for a cool tool to use, make sure you guys go find those in the Slack, and you guys can try to pick those up. Those are what we use at our facility, is the speed sluggers. I know you use those too, right, Justin?
I do. Yeah, I use it for all our classes. I got another one for you if you want to throw it in your Slack channel. And I don't work with this company, but Monty Lee, who's the head coach at Clemson, really good hitting guy. We trade ideas back and forth from time to time. I think the college baseball community, softball community does a awesome job at like building a system. And I've talked to Monty about that. But one thing he liked that I stole and the guys just loved in spring training this year are called 40-40 bats. So it's a 40-inch long, 40-ounce. So if you just Google 40-40 bats, there's only one company that I think makes them. You can only use them off front toss, but in terms of like feeling the barrel, if you lay off or push either one, if you lay off, you lose the barrel big time. It's like throwing a sack of rocks over your shoulder. And if you push, you can't accelerate the barrel. So I think you go down this wormhole, the internal, external cueing. Players usually have a harder time with internal cues because they don't like to feel a bunch of different body parts moving in rapid succession. But if you give them an external cue of move this object to here or hit the ball there, it tends to be easier for them. So just the feel of that big, heavy object. I know I had like 5 of them in spring training. I think they all walked off when we left for quarantine.
Awesome. And then can you just give us a summary, just something short about what you learned from being suspended in the air in the gymnastics arena when you had your K-vest? And
Learned a lot. I took a beating for that one, huh? The good thing about, I guess, me and my thoughts on Twitter, I think some people that are Twitter personalities would text me and say, why don't you just block these clowns or interact? Like, honestly, one, I'm so busy. I don't have time to look at it all the time, but usually I find out because somebody has texted me. And 2, it doesn't bother me whatsoever. And I laugh about it. So you see me looking like a jackass, strung up in the air, swinging a bat with no feet on the ground. And what I was doing was I was in a gymnastics studio and I swung in a deep trampoline and I swung suspended in air. And what we were doing, this is probably 2 years ago. It's been a long time that I did that. We were trying to figure out were the legs for speed creation or are the legs for stability? And although it's a little combination of both, it's much more important for stability. So my elastic middle can turn against that anchor. So we talked about at the beginning of my PVC progression, create an anchor up top, create an anchor down low, and your middle can be very dynamic and elastic. If you remove the upper body anchor, we're not near as explosive. That's your long swing. It's early torso rotation. But if you reduce the lower body anchor and we're not into the ground at all, imagine if you have somebody next to you and you grab their arm and you wring it like a towel. You produce a lot of torque between your two hands. But do it just with one, you don't. So when you lose that lower body anchor, and I had a K-vest on while I was doing that, you can imagine like the speed of my swing was just coming from my arms. So we got a lot of, and that's not surprising to anybody, but you can't go out and say that, oh, I believe this. You can say you believe it, but until you objectively test something, then it's just that. It's your opinion. And I like to live in more certainty than I do opinion. So, and anytime that you're going out and you're trying to do something that maybe is new for an industry, because I do have more tech toys than probably, arguably anybody else in the world, then you're going to do some things that look goofy and nobody's ever saw before, but all for the progress of hitting in science. So I'll take that. I'll take that beating any day. Good trade-off.
No, yeah, it was a great article that you shared as well. It was very insightful. Thanks for suspending yourself and giving us that information. All right, yeah, I know your daughter's ready to get her workout on. Hope she kicks your butt. And
yeah.
I really
quarantine is I work out every day and I keep getting fatter. I don't know what's going on here.
But all right, man. Well, hey, I appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Hey, thanks for listening, guys. Anytime 40 or 50 people want to get online and listen to me babble about hitting, it's pretty awesome, man. So thanks for being on and being my audience.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can your just Twitter handle is just at Elite Baseball, right?
Elite_baseball.
Elite_baseball. Sorry. And then let's the other thing too is the elitebaseball.tv. That's where you can kind of find a lot more drills. You can do movement screens and stuff on there too, right?
Yeah, the whole movement progression is on there. Links to every exercise and or hitting drill that we have in our library. It's pretty awesome. It's free for 48 hours too if you just want to go on and check it out.
Awesome. All right, well, hey, I appreciate it, man. Thank you so much.
See you guys. Have a good one. Thanks, Ryan.
Yep. Fitz, you got something for us today, right?
Yes, sir.
See, you're in the gulag.
Always. Never leave.
Do you want to just really quick, because I think we might have some new audience members today. You want to describe what the gulag is? I personally love it. I think that's super cool that you have that on there. And being a professional baseball player, it's cool to see that you've got these little. I think a lot of times too, kids hear these things like, oh, write this in your hat, or put this in your glove, or have this keep this card in your pocket. It's I don't have to do that silly thing. And you hear the best in the world and guys who play professional baseball literally spray paint their basement with funny words. So I think it's just kind of cool. Puts in perspective. Have fun with your reminders. So I'll let you take it from here.
Yeah. So for those of you that weren't on last time, I'm in my little small weight room here. I think I can put the camera around. You can kind of see I got a little weight set and got some weights there, and then I got some dumbbells over there. I got my light over here so you guys can see me. But above me, I got spray painted the gulag. For those of you that play, let me flip that around. For those of you that play video games, I'm a big gamer. Always have been. I play Call of Duty, and yeah. So the new game that came out is Call of Duty Warzone, and there's a mode in there where you get sent into the gulag, and the gulag is a famous prison in Russia, I believe, and it's kind of like Alcatraz in a way. And in the game, you get sent to the gulag, and you got to fight your way out in order to get back into the game. So I don't know. I made my home gym here, and I spray painted it up on the wall. So every time I come down here to get a workout in, I kind of mentally put myself in the gulag as if I'm actually in prison, because I feel like I'm doing some prison workouts down here, and I'm just fighting to get back into the game whenever that may be. So that's the whole thinking behind it. Just something fun to do, and encourage people to find little things like that just to motivate them for sure. So you want me to hop into the devotional, Ryan?
Yeah, just and I know you had kind of a little different perspective for today too. So
I'll outline that real quick. So yeah, for the devotional, I didn't really want to take the route of making it more faith related, but rather perspective related to more like life and baseball and the balance of it. Um, Ultimately, what I think baseball players and softball players need to understand, or any athlete needs to understand, is that baseball or softball, it's not who you are, it's just what you do. And as soon as you can realize that, your failures and successes won't define you as a human. So obviously, the game that we play is extremely hard. You know, you're just, if you're successful at the plate 30% of the time, you're going to be a Hall of Famer. So that means you're failing 70% of the time, and sometimes those failures may be at the end of the game when, you know, there's 2 outs, bottom of the ninth, and you got a chance to tie the game up with, you know, a runner on third or second, and you strike out looking, and the game ends, and you feel like you've let down, you know, your teammates, yourself, obviously, because, you know, you work so hard, you want to be successful, and that was an opportunity to lift your team up, and you weren't successful. But I think understanding that you are more than just the game you play. Understanding that you are a brother, a sister, a son, a teammate, a friend, is way more important than you getting the game-winning hit. Obviously, we all want to do that, and obviously, we all care too. It shouldn't be a thing where it's like, well, I'm a good person, and I don't care if I succeed. I don't think that's a good attitude to have either. But understanding the difficulty of this game, and how hard it can be, and just not riding that roller coaster of emotions. You know, there's going to be times when obviously you're doing horrible. You know, it could last for a day, it could last for a week, it could last for, I mean, for some guys it lasts for an entire season. But understanding again that you know, you have people in your life that love you and you love them, and if they're healthy and everything is well in that area of your life, I don't think allowing the successes and failures in your game should be able to affect that. So, you know, and this goes for, you know, on defense as well, or, you know, a pitcher, you know, gives up the game-winning hit, and, you know, they walk off against you, or you make an error and you lose the game because of it. Obviously, you're upset at yourself and you want to just crawl into a hole. But knowing also that you did everything you could in your power to prepare for that situation. And understanding that, again, you are a good human. You're a good person. Again, you have people that love you. You love them. So at the end of the day, I think that's all that matters. Reflecting on, you know, the failure that you had, or even the success. Like I said, riding that roller coaster emotions, but reflecting on that, and keeping it in perspective, and not allowing that to affect your psyche. Especially over, you know, for professionals over the course of 140, 162 game season. I mean, that can wear on you physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally. And it's definitely something that could ruin your career if you let it. And like I said, with baseball and it being so hard, I mean, like I said too, you could be very successful for, you know, a day, a week, a month, or an entire season, and then, you know, it goes back the other way. And that's just the nature of the game. So ultimately, I think you should value being a good human being over being a good baseball or softball player. And I think that will take you a lot further in the game. If you go, 4 for 4, 0 for 4, understanding, you know, you did everything you could to make it work, you know, maybe checking the process. And I think that's a big piece that I had to learn in pro ball. You know, I was the guy that, you know, in college I'd strike out and, you know, come in and there goes my bat in the bat rack, and it's getting blown up. So again, understanding that there's more to it, and it's a long game. And as long as you stick to your process, I think getting a process that you feel comfortable in and you're convicted in, that you believe in, is huge. Because if you stick to that process and things don't work out, you can put your head on your pillow at night and say, okay, I stuck to my process and it didn't work. You know, it is what it is. And then also understanding though too that, okay, I didn't stick to my process, but I was successful. I got lucky, and knowing that, okay, you know, let's not again ride the roller coaster. Okay, I'm doing so well, but I have a broken process, and then you go back down. And it's like, oh no, my process is still broke. If you have that good process, you should stay level the entire time, and never get too low and never get too high. So I have some other notes here. So I think this sometimes too, Justin Stone mentioned the Twitter hitting world. I have this, I guess, theory that I've thought of where some of these hitting coaches make their hitting philosophy their identity. It becomes who they are. So when you start to ask questions or, challenge their philosophy, they feel as though they're being personally attacked because it's their identity. You're almost questioning their identity of who they are, just by asking questions and possibly disagreeing with their philosophy or methods, which is why, as Justin said, that the whole Twitter world has blown up and it's a mess. But and I think the same goes for your personal coaches. Some of them, they almost make it their religion, and they have their code or their Bible that they follow, and that may work for some people, and for others it may not. But again, understanding your identity and who you are, I think will take you a long way in this game, and just understanding your value as a human over your value as a baseball player or softball player. So that's all I got.
Thanks, Fitz. I appreciate you taking the time today.
Yeah, definitely.
If anybody else has any other kind of like wrap-up questions or additional thoughts, we'll kind of hang out for maybe a couple more minutes. If you guys are good, feel free to hop off the call, and we'll see you guys tomorrow. If you guys got anything, as people are kind of heading off, if you guys just want to unmute yourselves, or I don't have a ton of time, but if you guys have any additional thoughts, love to hear them. Going once, going twice. All right, guys. We'll see you tomorrow. Thanks for your time. And good questions today. Today was cool with all the engagement. Fitz, I really appreciate it. Thanks again, man.
Definitely. Anytime.
All right, we'll catch up later.